For Eric J on Sports, I'm Eric J, and this is what I think. In late 2023, All Elite Wrestling introduced their Continental Championship, which was another men's singles championship to go with their world title, their TNT title, their international title, and the men's world title in Ring of Honor and the Ring of Honor television title. They introduced the Continental title, and Eddie Kingston was the inaugural champion. Shortly after that, in their sister promotion Ring of Honor, they introduced a women's television title. And so there are people who believe that between All Elite Wrestling and Ring of Honor, they might have too many belts. Now, if you think back to the origins of All Elite Wrestling, the people who started All Elite Wrestling, and I'm not talking about Tony Khan here, I'm talking about Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks. Yes, of course, Cody Rhodes was involved, but Cody Rhodes doesn't have the history that the other three have. And what I mean by that is, though they traveled around the world working for any and every promotion that would pay them, Omega and the Bucks grew to the notoriety which they currently possess in New Japan Pro Wrestling. And New Japan Pro Wrestling was where they felt like they were home. And a lot of what AEW is what New Japan is. The company is more match-centric with a lot fewer extended, drawn-out storylines. And the wrestling is the thing, and they have a lot of titles, and they have a lot of champions, and it's important to be competing to be the best. The G1 Climax tournament, the Best of Super Juniors tournament, all these tournaments that they hold in New Japan Pro Wrestling, everything is about being the best, everything is about being a champion, everything is about being elevated. So when AEW was created kind of in a New Japan model, as opposed to a WWE model where you have about 3 or 4 titles and you have a singular contender chasing the title for a few months or a few weeks, and then you move on to another flavor of the month. But AEW followed that model. Now, if you look at New Japan, they have their World Heavyweight Championship, which is what grew out of their Intercontinental title and their World title being combined. The IWGP Heavyweight Championship and the IWGP Intercontinental Championship were merged, and that's what became the World Heavyweight Championship. They created the IWGP Global Championship, which replaced the US Championship, which is weird that a Japanese company would have a United States title, but they did. They've also got a Junior Heavyweight title, and they have the Never Openweight Championship and the King of Pro Wrestling Championship and the Television Championship. And their sister promotion, New Japan Strong, which is based in the United States, has the New Japan Strong Openweight Championship, another belt Eddie Kingston holds. And then you add to that their tag team championships, their junior heavyweight tag team championships, their strong openweight tag team championships, their 6-man tag team championships, their women's title, and their New Japan Strong women's title. That gives them 13 championships that can be contested in New Japan Pro Wrestling between both companies. So it looks like New Japan has too many titles. And you may be right if you think that, but if you think that a lot of belts is good because it gives a lot of wrestlers something to shoot for, you're also right. Because I agree with that. I believe that having a lot of belts can be a good thing because it gives wrestlers something to shoot for. Everybody is pursuing a title. Everybody's pursuing a champion. Everybody's wanting to be the best. So back to All Elite Wrestling. All Elite Wrestling has their men's world title, and they have their international title, and they have their Continental title, and they have their TNT title, and then Ring of Honor has a men's world title, and Ring of Honor has a television title. So that's 6 men's singles championships that can be contested. AEW also has their women's world title, and the TBS title, and the Ring of Honor women's title, and the Ring of Honor women's television title, which means now you have 10 titles total because that's 4 for the women and 6 for the men. Then AEW has a tag team and a trios championship, and Ring of Honor has a tag team and a 6-man championship. And then Ring of Honor has the Pure Championship, which Wheeler Yuta has, but he's never around to defend it. So AEW has 15 belts, just like New Japan has 13 belts. So yes, maybe AEW has too many titles. They've got 7 men's singles titles, they've got 4 men's tag team titles, and they've got 4 women's singles titles. Maybe that's too much, but maybe it's not. Even though during a single period, Eddie Kingston was holding 3 different titles, 2 of them belonging to the AEW Ring of Honor umbrella and the third one belonging to New Japan, there's always somebody with a belt that can be contested. And because AEW has promotional ties with companies like AAA and CMLL, and New Japan, of course, and other companies, then the AAA Mega Championship gets defended on AEW television. The AAA Cruiserweight Champion currently works for AEW. There are a lot of belts and a lot of champions and a lot of opportunities for wrestlers because the guys who are competing for the international title, who challenged Orange Cassidy or who challenged Roderick Strong, aren't the same guys who were challenging Samoa Joe and who now will be challenging Swerve Strickland for the world title. The guys who are challenging Adam Copeland and previous to that Christian Cage for the TNT Championship aren't the same guys who were challenging for the Ring of Honor World title or the Ring of Honor Television title or the Pure Championship. The 6-man titles or the Trios titles have currently been merged, and then so was the AEW Continental Championship and the Ring of Honor World Championship and the New Japan Strong Championship. That was supposed to be an American Triple Crown. But Eddie Kingston defended the belts individually, and he's lost 2 of the 3. So the 6-man titles in Ring of Honor and the Trios titles in AEW will probably be separated at some point. Saying all of this says that there are a lot of belts. And yes, AEW has a lot of belts. Well more than WWE. WWE has 2 world titles, 2 secondary titles, a women's world title, and tag team titles on both Raw and SmackDown, I guess you could say. And then they have the North American title at NXT and the women's title and tag titles. And they have a women's title and tag belts in WWE. They got about 15 belts too, but they pretend as if those belts and those companies and those brands are all separate, and they still flavor of the month the champions. But anybody who is looking at AEW or New Japan for that matter and saying, these guys have way too many belts. If they're WWE fans and not wrestling fans, they need to remember that WWE has 2 world titles and 2 secondary titles and an NXT title and tag belts on all 3 companies and in women's titles and in women's tag titles and all of these other things. WWE has more than 10 championships also. So yes, AEW has a lot of titles. Yes, it seems like a lot. It seems like everybody could be a champion. And when you hear guys like Conan and Jim Cornette and Booker T talk about how AEW has too many belts, they forget that WWE has the same number of titles as AEW or New Japan. But the truth is, I would rather have a wrestling company where everybody wants to be a champion than have a wrestling company where guys are just floundering, having matches and feuding just for the sake of having matches and feuding, and the feud's going nowhere. If somebody's having matches trying to be the best, like Bryan Danielson is right now, where he's having matches with Will Ospreay and with Kyle Fletcher and with Zack Sabre Jr. and with Katsuyori Shibata and, Tomohiro Ishii, and he's wrestling all these guys just to prove he's the best, that's his storyline and that's fine. But if you look at the other members of the Blackpool Combat Club, Claudio just had a match with Swerve Strickland for the world title. Jon Moxley is the IWGP World Heavyweight Champion. Wheeler Yuta is the Ring of Honor Pure Champion. Those guys are trying to be champions. They're not just out there fighting for the sake of fighting. And people who are challenging all of these factions and all of these entities are doing so because they want to be champions. Top Flight and Action Andretti want to be 6-man champions. The Acclaimed and Billy Gunn were 6-man champions. The Dark Order wants to be 6-man champions. All of these factions and all of these entities want to be champions. PAC just recently had a match against Okada for the Continental title, while the members of the Elite, Okada and the Bucks, have just won championships, while at the same time Penta just had a match against Adam Copeland for the TNT title, and Phoenix just returned from injury. So everybody is trying to be champion. So that's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to have a lot of belts that people can chase, because back in the old days when WWE just had the world title and the Intercontinental title and the tag belts, you had hundreds of wrestlers on the roster, but only 3 championships to chase, which means you had a lot of wrestlers just doing something for the sake of getting a check. I like it better this way. You may or may not agree, and you're welcome to that opinion. So drop me a comment and let me know. I'd love to hear from you. Remember to like and share this video and subscribe to this channel, and visit the Eric J on Sports website, and follow me on Facebook at Eric J on Sports 1 and on Instagram and Twitter at Eric J on Sports. And for Eric J on Sports, I'm Eric J, and this is what I think.